So I want you to imagine waking up. It is exactly 2:17 a.m.
Ugh, the worst time to wake up.
Right. It's pitch black. It's completely silent, except for maybe like the faint hum of your refrigerator down the hall.
Yeah, you're in that really heavy, disorienting fog.
Exactly, that sudden wakefulness.
Yeah.
And you're pulled from sleep by a sound that you know intimately. It's just three short, sharp vibrations against the wood of your nightstand.
Just buzz, buzz.
Yes, you roll over, you squint against that harsh, that really bright blue glare of your smartphone screen cutting through the dark.
Which is blinding at 2 in the morning.
Totally blinding. And you assume it's an emergency or maybe like a late night group chat that you just forgot to mute.
Right, something mundane.
But then your eyes adjust to the brightness and you see the notification. It's a text message. And it is from your own phone number.
Which is just, it's so jarring.
Your exact digits.
Yeah.
Your contact name. Like your own profile picture is literally staring back at you. And the message, just glowing there in the dark, says 5 words. Don't look under your bed.
It is, it's just the absolute perfect modern distillation of terror.
It really, really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are acting as your personal guides through a phenomenal piece of source material.
I'm so excited for this one.
Me too. We're looking at a YouTube transcript from a channel known as the Midnight Curator, which, if you don't know, basically operates as this dark archive of terrifying, anomalous narratives.
Yeah, they find the really good, unsettling stuff.
They really do. And the specific piece we're examining today is titled, "The Voice Under My Bed Sounded Exactly Like Me."
Such a great title.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is, well, it's very specific. We are going to completely dissect the psychological and the structural architecture of this narrative.
Because it's built like a trap.
It is. We want to explore together with you how this story weaponizes everyday technology, how it manipulates the flow of time to paralyze its victim, and ultimately how it uses the protagonist's own curiosity and their own identity to execute what is essentially a horrific, inescapable trap.
Well, what's so brilliant about this piece is the setting, right? And the setup. It takes the absolute most universal childhood fear.
The monster under the bed.
Exactly, the monster under the bed. Like, we have all been there.
Absolutely.
Lying awake as kids, staring at the ceiling, just absolutely convinced that if we let our foot dangle even an inch over the edge of the mattress,
something is going to grab it.
Right. Something is going to reach out from the dark and grab our ankle. But this narrative, it takes that primal childhood trope and drastically evolves it.
It really updates the operating system on that fear.
It does. It transforms it into a highly sophisticated psychological thriller about basically digital identity theft. It asks a deeply unsettling question, which is, what if the monster doesn't just want to scare you? What if the supernatural creature has been studying you, mapping your digital life, and now, well, wants to actually be you?
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at that inciting incident, because the way this story begins is just so incredibly grounded in our everyday reality.
It's almost too relatable.
Right. It starts with the disruption of the mundane, the digital doppelganger, basically. It's 2:01 a.m. The narrator is asleep in their bed, which is, supposedly their ultimate safe sanctuary.
Their fortress.
And they're awoken by those 3 vibrating notifications. Now, my initial reaction to a text like that from myself would probably just be annoyance.
Oh, 100%. You wouldn't jump straight to fear.
No. I'd think of a spam message or a phishing attempt or, I don't know, some glitch in my cellular provider's network.
Sure, like a system error.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it used to be a physical bump in the night that woke us up in terror, right? Like a floorboard creaking. But now, the horror starts with our technology malfunctioning in a way that feels intensely personal.
What's fascinating here is that transition from physical threat to digital anomaly. Like, let's really break down the psychological impact of receiving a message from yourself.
Yeah, why does that get under our skin so fast?
Because it creates an immediate breach of what we consider our ultimate safe space, which is our digital identity.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, think about how we use our phone numbers today. Your phone number is, it's arguably the most consistent, unique identifier you possess in the modern world.
It totally is. It's basically your digital social security number.
Exactly. And it's the master key. It's tied to your bank accounts, your private conversations, your photos.
Your 2-factor authentication for, everything.
Right, everything. So seeing that you've received a text message from your exact same digits with your own face in the contact bubble, it triggers this massive cognitive dissonance.
So Walk us through the mechanics of that cognitive dissonance. Like, what is actually happening in the narrator's brain at 2:407 a.m.?
Well, cognitive dissonance at its core is the mental discomfort experienced by someone who holds two or more contradictory beliefs or ideas simultaneously.
Okay.
In this moment, the narrator holds two conflicting truths. Truth A, I am the sole owner and operator of this phone number and this identity.
Right.
And truth B, someone or something else is currently operating this phone number to communicate with me.
And those cannot both be true.
Exactly. The human brain hates ambiguity. It hates contradiction. It desperately scrambles to resolve that dissonance. And this is why the narrator's immediate response is rationalization.
You have to explain it away.
They have to find a logical explanation to restore their worldview. So they tell themselves, oh, someone spoofed my caller ID. It's a prank app. It's a hacker.
And to be fair, caller ID spoofing is a very real, very common thing. I mean, scammers do it all the time to make it look like your bank is calling you or the IRS.
Oh, yeah, it happens constantly.
So the brain is grabbing onto that real-world technical explanation like a life preserver.
Yes. The brain is saying, okay, this is a technological vulnerability, not a supernatural threat. But notice how the entity chooses to initiate contact.
Right, the wording.
The text just says, don't look under your bed. It doesn't send a death threat. It doesn't send like a jump scare image or a barrage of screaming text.
It's very restrained.
It's highly calculated psychological manipulation. By sending a warning, the entity is strangely positioning itself as an ally, or a protector even.
Which is so messed up.
It is.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, it's executing a flawless psychological trap.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. It's the classic, don't think of a pink elephant trick.
Precisely. In psychology, this is known as ironic process theory, or the white bear problem.
The white bear problem.
Yeah, it's named after a famous experiment by Daniel Wegner. Wegner told subjects, try not to think of a white bear. And of course, that is all they could think about.
Because you have to think about it to make sure you're not thinking about it.
Exactly. When you actively try to suppress a thought, part of your mind has to constantly monitor your thoughts to ensure you aren't thinking about it.
That is so counterproductive.
It is. This monitoring process ironically keeps the thought at the absolute forefront of your consciousness. So, by explicitly commanding, don't look under your bed, the entity guarantees that the space under the bed becomes the absolute focal point of the narrator's reality.
And the narrator falls right into it. They try to rationalize the fear away by physically disproving it.
Because they have to know.
Right. They literally lean over, they turn on their phone's flashlight, and they check under the bed.
And what do they find?
Boxes and dust. Nothing unusual at all. So they turn off the light, feeling a bit silly, maybe a bit annoyed at the prank, and they try to go back to sleep. The rational mind has momentarily triumphed over the primal fear. They prove to themselves that the space is empty.
But the reality is that the mere act of checking was the very first victory for the entity.
Because it got them to engage.
Yes. The seed has been planted. The mundane has been officially disrupted. That physical space under the bed is no longer just storage for old shoes, you know? It has been permanently highlighted as a zone of potential threat in the narrator's subconscious.
They acknowledge the arena.
Exactly. The entity forced the narrator to acknowledge the space, to interact with it, to validate the premise of the text message.
And any release they felt, it just evaporates instantly. Because right as they're drifting off, like just closing their eyes, the phone buzzes again.
That dread.
It's another message from their own number, just 3 words this time. I told you.
Ugh.
And this is where the narrator makes a decision that changes everything. They decide to reply. They type back, who is this?
Which is such a human reaction.
No, wait, I have to stop right here because I'm struggling with this part. Why on earth would the narrator text back?
You wouldn't.
If I wake up at 2 in the morning and get a creepy text from my own clone number, I am not initiating a conversation. I am turning the phone off. I am putting it in airplane mode. Like, why engage?
It's a fantastic question, and it really speaks to a very specific psychological vulnerability we all have when it comes to our digital devices.
Okay.
You might think you'd turn it off, but the urge to engage is overwhelming due to something called the need for cognitive closure, or NFCC.
Need for cognitive closure.
Right. When we are presented with a mystery, especially one that directly involves our personal identity, the brain experiences a profound state of tension.
It's like an itch you can't scratch.
Yes, and turning off the phone doesn't resolve the tension. It actually exacerbates the ambiguity.
Because then you're just alone with your thoughts.
Exactly. If you turn off the phone, you are left lying in the dark, wondering who has your number, what they want, and what they are going to do next. You're defenseless.
Oh, that's a terrifying point.
By asking, "Who is this?" the narrator is desperately trying to close the information gap. They are seeking a known variable to replace the unknown terror.
Okay, that makes terrifying sense. They're trying to regain control of the narrative by demanding answers.
But the answer they get completely strips away whatever control they thought they had.
It really does. Because the reply is instant. Just one word. You.
So creepy.
The narrator types back, "This isn't funny." And the immediate response is, "It's not supposed to be."
The entity is not playing along.
Yeah. But here is where the story shifts gears entirely. It's not just the creepy content of the messages anymore. The narrator suddenly notices the metadata.
This is the turning point.
They look at the timestamps on the message thread. The very first message, the warning not to look, says it was sent at 2:500 a.m. The "I told you" message is stamped 2:18 a.m. The reply to their question is stamped 2:100 a.m.
Okay, pretty standard so far.
But then, the narrator looks up at the digital clock at the very top of their actual phone display, and the current real-world time only reads 2:1 a.m.
This is, it's a phenomenal structural escalation of the horror.
My jaw dropped when I read that part.
Because up until this precise moment, the narrator could still desperately cling to the hope of an elaborate hack, right? A glitch or a malicious prank by someone using spoofing software.
It was still bound by the rules of reality.
Exactly. But the timestamp anomaly shatters that entirely. We have moved from a technological vulnerability into the realm of the impossible. The entity isn't just hijacking a phone number, it is hijacking causality itself.
The messages are literally arriving from the future. It's giving them future warnings.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at how we usually view future knowledge.
Well, yeah, I want to push back on something here.
Yeah.
Usually in science fiction, in fantasy, or even in our own daydreams, knowing the future is framed as the ultimate superpower.
Right, like having the sports almanac in Back to the Future.
Exactly. If you know what's going to happen, you have an inherent advantage. You can change your choices, avoid disasters, win the lottery. But in this specific narrative, knowing the future is the exact opposite of empowerment. It is deeply, fundamentally paralyzing.
That is a brilliant observation, and it cuts to the core of why the story is so terrifying. The entity is not giving the narrator future warnings so they can change their fate.
No.
The entity is weaponizing the future to prove that their fate is already entirely sealed.
It's unavoidable.
Yes, it is a terrifying demonstration of hard determinism. Let's look at the mechanics of how the entity executes this temporal manipulation.
Right, the longer text.
It sends a longer, much more specific message. It reads, "In 2 minutes, you're going to hear something under the bed."
Oh.
And the timestamp on that specific message is 2:20 a.m. But the phone's actual clock, staring the narrator right in the face, still reads 2:18 a.m.
He's creating a countdown.
Exactly. But it's worse than a countdown. It is stripping the narrator of all free will and agency. The narrator is now locked in a 2-minute temporal waiting room.
A waiting room. That's such a good way to put it.
They cannot stop the clock from ticking forward to 2:20. The future event has already been dictated, recorded, and sent back to them. The psychological torture here is the anticipation.
Which is always worse than the event itself.
Because anticipatory anxiety is often far more debilitating than reactive fear. Like, think about it. When a tiger jumps out of the bushes, your body reacts instantly, fight or flight.
Right. Instinct takes over.
You don't have time to think. But when you are told a tiger will enter this room in exactly 2 minutes, your brain has 120 agonizing seconds to catastrophize.
Just sitting there imagining it.
Yes. To imagine every horrific outcome, to flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline while you sit completely still.
I can vividly imagine sitting in that dark room, just watching the minutes slowly tick by on the harsh digital display. 2:18, then 2:18.
The tension in the air must be absolutely suffocating.
Your eyes darting back and forth between the time and that dark space near the floor. And then, the exact moment the clock strikes 2:00 a.m., the predicted event happens.
Right on the second.
Right on the second. The text promised there would be a sound, and right at 2:20 they hear it, a soft sound from directly under the bed. Something slowly scratching against the wooden floorboards.
That soft scratching sound is the fulcrum upon which the entire reality of the narrative shifts.
It validates everything.
Up until that exact second, The narrator's brain was still fighting the dissonance. It was still trying to say, the hawk is glitching, the phone is broken, this is an elaborate hoax.
They were holding out hope.
But the moment the physical reality, the undeniable acoustic reality of the room, perfectly matches the impossible digital prediction, the narrator's worldview completely collapses.
It has to.
The text messages are undeniably validated. The impossible is real. The entity has proven that it not only controls the digital space of the phone, but it possesses an omniscient, unchangeable view of the physical timeline.
And the second it proves it controls time, it immediately pivots to controlling the physical space. The very next message arrives. Don't move.
Dictating behavior now.
And what's chilling is that the text came in before the scratching even happened.
Mm-hmm.
The sender already knew the narrator was going to freeze in terror.
It knows them perfectly.
And the world of the narrator, which just, 10 minutes ago used to be their whole apartment, their whole life, the whole city outside their window, it is suddenly and violently shrunk down to the exact dimensions of their mattress.
Yes, what we are seeing here is geographical constriction leading directly into a complete sensory siege.
Sensory siege.
The entity begins to issue direct physical orders, don't let your feet touch the floor, and then it adds a truly terrifying justification. It heard you earlier.
Oh, that makes my skin crawl. It heard you.
Now let's really examine the sensory details the author provides here because they are masterful. We have darkness, which is a literal form of sensory deprivation.
Right, you can't see anything.
The visual cortex is starved of input, but simultaneously, the narrator is experiencing extreme hyperarousal. Their sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive.
Heart pounding, sweating.
Exactly. Their adrenaline is spiking, their pupils are dilated, trying to let in more light, and their heart is beating so loudly they literally feel the vibration in their chest. When you are in a state of terrified sensory deprivation, your brain acts like an amplifier turned up to maximum volume.
It's trying to gather data to save you.
It amplifies whatever minute input it does receive.
Right. If you are sitting in a perfectly quiet, dark room, just the sound of a house settling sounds like a gunshot.
Yes.
Every tiny rustle becomes massive and threatening.
Exactly. And the entity knows this. The entity is utilizing classic psychological warfare tactics, similar to what you might see in extreme interrogations or torture scenarios.
Wow, really?
Oh, absolutely. It isolates the target, physically restricts their movement to a confined space, the bed deprives them of normal sensory input via the dark room, and then slowly feeds them highly specific, terrifying audio stimuli.
The scratching.
Yes, the text describes a faint dragging sound. Slow, careful, something moving across the floor directly beneath the mattress, and then worst of all, low, wet breathing. Almost like someone's struggling to breathe quietly.
See, that specific phrase, low, wet breathing, triggers such a profound biological disgust response.
It does. It's visceral.
It's not just scary. It sounds diseased. It sounds completely unnatural.
And by narrating these events via text from the future, the entity ensures the narrator is hyper-focused on these minute, horrifying sounds. It's forcing the narrator to actively listen to their own impending doom.
Which is just sadistic.
It is. The concept of geographical constriction here, the shrinking of the world to the mattress, brings to mind the psychological concept of learned helplessness.
Oh, I've heard of that. How does learned helplessness apply here exactly?
So, learned helplessness, discovered by psychologist Martin Seligman, occurs when an animal is repeatedly subjected to an aversive stimulus that it cannot escape.
They just give up.
Eventually, yes. The animal stops trying to avoid the stimulus and behaves as if it is utterly helpless to change the situation, even if an escape route later opens up.
That's so sad.
By establishing absolute control over the timeline and absolute control over the boundaries of the bed, the entity is rapidly inducing learned helplessness in the narrator. The narrator believes they cannot run, they cannot fight, they can only endure.
It reminds me of the universal childhood game, The Floor is Lava.
Oh, perfect analogy.
You jump from the couch to the coffee table, pretending the carpet will incinerate you. But the author here has taken that innocent concept and framed it through the lens of pure, visceral survival and spatial disorientation.
It's the floor is lava, but the stakes are your life.
Exactly. The bed is no longer a place of rest or comfort or sleep. It has been violently transformed into a tiny, exposed island in a sea of absolute darkness.
An island under siege.
If you touch the floor, you die. Or worse. And then the psychological manipulation deepens even further. The narrator, desperate types, what is it? Referring to the thing making the wet breathing sounds.
And the reply.
The reply from their own number is you. The sender elaborates, typing that the supernatural creature under the bed is you from tomorrow, and that tonight is when it gets there.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this introduces a fascinating and incredibly manipulative layer of deception.
The lie.
Yes. Let's extrapolate on why the entity would feed the narrator this specific complex lie. Like, why claim to be a future version of the narrator? Why not just say, I am a demon, or I am a killer?
Because if you say you are a demon, the rules are simple. I run or I fight.
Exactly. It serves to deeply, fundamentally confuse the victim's survival instincts.
It shorts out the brain.
If you believe you are fighting a monster, a separate alien entity, your instinct is the classic fight-or-flight response mediated by your amygdala. But if you are told from a source that has already proven it knows the future that the thing under your bed is you,
An inevitable future version of yourself.
how do you fight that?
You can't.
You can't. It introduces a fatalistic paradox that crashes the brain's defense systems. It makes the narrator question their own reality, their own timeline, their own identity. It turns self-preservation into a terrifying contradiction.
Right, because are they hiding from a predator, or are they hiding from their own inevitable destiny?
It's a brilliant way to induce absolute hesitation.
Because naturally, you would hesitate to attack yourself, even a monstrous, heavily breathing version of yourself. But, as terrifying as the scratching and the low, wet breathing are, the terror of this story peaks, not with a roar,
No.
not with a violent attack breaking through the mattress. It peaks with a whisper. The entity brings out its most terrifying weapon yet, which is perfect mimicry.
Yes. We are now entering the uncanny valley of the self.
Ooh, I love that phrasing.
The texts, which are still arriving from the future, warn the narrator, in 1 minute, you're going to hear your voice. And then, at exactly 2:22 a.m., from the darkness underneath the bed, a voice whispers very softly, very slowly, "Don't look under the bed."
It's mocking them.
And the source material is explicitly clear here. It sounds exactly, flawlessly like the narrator. Same pitch, same tone, same rhythm, same quiet, halting way they speak when they are nervous.
See, that detail, the nervous speech pattern, is so incredibly disturbing to me. Because we've all heard AI voice cloning, right?
Sure.
You can feed a few seconds of someone's voice into software, and it can read a script, but it often sounds a bit flat or a bit robotic.
It lacks the human element.
What the entity's doing here isn't just an AI voice clone reading a script. It's a perfect, nuanced replication of the narrator's current emotional state. It knows exactly how they sound when they are utterly terrified. It is wearing their fear.
That is a chilling way to put it. It is wearing their fear. And this raises an important evolutionary question, like what makes encountering an exact copy of oneself or hearing a perfect mimic of a human voice so deeply, instinctually unsettling?
Yeah, why do we hate that so much? It's
Oh.
universally creepy.
We need to look at the uncanny valley theory. Originally coined by robotics professor Masahiro Mori in 1970, the theory usually applies to visual representations.
The weird CGI.
Right. As a robot or an animation becomes more human-like, our empathy toward it increases. But there is a point of valley where it looks almost perfectly human, but is just slightly off.
Like the Polar Express movie.
Yes. Its movements are too rigid, or its eyes are dead. At that point, our empathy plummets into revulsion and fear.
Interesting.
Evolutionary biologists suggest this revulsion is an ancient defense mechanism. Our ancestors needed to avoid corpses or people infected with diseases like rabies who might look human but act erratically. We evolved to be terrified of things that look human but aren't.
But here, the mimicry isn't visual yet, it's auditory.
Exactly. We have an auditory uncanny valley.
Mhm.
Throughout human history, certain predators have used vocal mimicry to lure prey.
Like certain birds or big cats.
Yes. And on a deeper psychological level, your voice is your primary tool for projecting your inner identity into the external world. It is how you assert your existence.
Your voice is you.
When something else wields your voice, especially to communicate with you autonomously in the dark beneath you, it shatters the psychological boundary of the self. It feels like an existential violation. You are being erased and replaced in real time.
And the violation doesn't stop at audio. It quickly escalates into the visual realm.
It gets worse.
The text messages warn, in 30 seconds, you will drop your phone. Now, the narrator is confused by this. They are gripping the phone for dear life. They think, why would I willingly drop my only source of light and information?
They think they can outsmart it.
But then, the entity forces the issue. Something physical, something incredibly strong, grabs the underside of the mattress hard.
Just violently.
The entire bed shakes violently, and that sudden physical jolt causes the phone to slip from the narrator's sweaty hands and fall right over the edge onto the floor beside the bed.
Notice the crucial shift in tactics here. We have seen a steady transition from psychological manipulation to temporal manipulation to auditory manipulation, and now, finally, to direct physical intervention.
It's escalating its attacks.
The entity controlled time, it controlled the soundscape, and now it violently alters the physical environment to force the narrator into the next stage of the trap.
So the phone lands on the floorboards. The screen is still glowing brightly in the dark. And because of how it landed, the camera on the back of the phone happens to be pointed directly under the bed.
The worst possible angle.
The smartphone screen essentially becomes a terrifying digital viewfinder. It's almost like the narrator is watching a live feed security camera into their own doom.
Oh, that's such a good visual.
The narrator is paralyzed, staring down at the glowing screen from the relative safety of the mattress. And through the grainy, blurry, dark image on the screen, they see a pale hand slowly dragging itself across the floor.
The anticipation here is awful.
And then the camera shifts, and they see a face, their own face, staring back from the darkness under the bed. And the lips on that face slowly curl into a wide smile.
It is the ultimate visual confirmation of the auditory horror we just discussed. The doppelganger is undeniably real. There is a very specific, deeply chilling detail in the source material regarding this exact moment.
Yes, I know exactly what you're going to say.
The face on the screen, it isn't looking directly at the phone's camera lens.
Right, I caught that too. The face on the phone screen is looking up.
It's looking up.
It is looking up toward the edge of the mattress, directly at the narrator's physical body.
Yes.
Like, think about the layers of voyeurism and exposure happening here. The narrator is looking at a digital screen to look into physical space under a bed, to see a creature that's looking directly past the camera, right at them in the real world.
It breaks the fourth wall of the technology.
Exactly. Technology like a phone camera usually gives us a safe psychological distance from what we are viewing. We feel protected behind the glass. But here, the technology is actually highlighting how violently close the physical threat really is. The barrier of the screen has completely collapsed.
And while this intense visual horror is happening, the texts are still arriving. They're providing the grim lore and the rules of this supernatural predator.
Is monologuing via text.
The entity texting them writes, "It's something that copies people. It lives in dark spaces, under beds." And then the most terrifying admission of all arrives. The narrator, crying, types, "What happens if I look?"
Oh, the dread.
Then the reply is, "That's how I got here."
The entity is telling them exactly how the trap operates. It's a vicious, unbreakable cycle. But even knowing it's a trap, the tension in the room is stretched to its absolute breaking point.
It's suffocating.
The whisper from the physical entity under the bed begins to change its tone. Initially, it was begging. "Just look, please," it whispered, sounding desperate and needy.
Trying to play on empathy.
But then, it shifts. It drops the act entirely. It becomes calm, cold, patient. The whisper says, "You're going to look eventually."
Ugh, the confidence.
It's the chilling confidence of an apex predator that knows its prey's psychology far better than the prey does. And this perfectly sets the stage for the entity's final, most brilliant, and most devastating manipulation, which is the war of conflicting information.
This is where the trap truly springs. And it springs using the most overwhelming cognitive tactic possible.
Break it down for us.
As the narrator is drawn to look, staring paralyzed at their own smiling face on the phone screen, the text messages from their own number begin to fracture.
The narrative splits.
Yes, the narrative in the text thread splits. The messages begin to wildly conflict with one another.
I want you, the listener, to try and put yourself in this exact moment of sheer mind-breaking cognitive overload.
It's almost unimaginable.
You are paralyzed on a mattress. There is a perfect physical copy of you underneath it, whispering to you in your own voice that it's going to get you. And your phone, which has been your only lifeline to information this entire time, suddenly becomes a chaotic battleground.
Complete chaos.
One set of messages is screaming at you in all caps. "Stop!" If you look over the edge, it replaces you. "Do not look." These feel like desperate warnings from an ally.
Will protect her.
But then, a strangely rushed, panicky set of messages interjects in the exact same thread. Don't listen to that one. Look under the bed. It's the only way out. Hurry.
The absolute dark genius of this strategy cannot be overstated. By playing good cop and bad cop via the exact same trusted text thread, the entity creates a brilliant illusion of a helpful guide.
It manufactures an ally.
Up until this specific moment, the narrator still clung to the belief that the entity texting them from the future was trying to warn them, trying to save them, while the physical entity dragging itself under the bed was the sole threat.
Right, two separate forces.
The narrator believed they had an ally in the machine, but the final devastating text shatters that illusion completely.
The reveal.
The message reads, "The thing texting you isn't you from the future, it's the one under the bed."
That is the ultimate gut punch.
It really is.
The realization that there was never an ally. There was never a benevolent future self trying to alter the timeline to save them. The entity manipulating the phone and the entity lurking under the bed were the exact same thing all along. It was a one-man show.
It was playing both sides of the chessboard.
And the source explicitly highlights a phrase the entity used earlier, which is really the key to the whole story. It knows curiosity will win.
Right.
The entity didn't just use fear to trap the narrator.
No, fear is too simple.
Fear makes you hide. Fear makes you pull the covers over your head and stay perfectly still on the mattress. The entity used the most basic, fatal human urge, which is the urge to know. It weaponized curiosity.
Exactly. We need to explore the psychology of why this works so flawlessly.
Please do.
The entity forced the narrator into a state of severe decision fatigue and cognitive overload. The narrator is experiencing intense physical terror, impossible temporal anomalies, and now diametrically opposed instructions coming from a trusted digital source.
It's too much input.
Look versus don't look, it will save you versus it will replace you.
How does the brain handle that level of contradiction in a life or death scenario? Like, what does it do?
It handles it very poorly. There is a concept in psychology called information gap theory, developed by George Lowenstein.
Okay.
It posits that curiosity is essentially an unpleasant state of arousal. When there is a gap between what we know and what we want to know, we feel a mental itch that absolutely must be scratched.
And the bigger the stakes, the worse the edge.
Exactly. When the human brain is subjected to massive, contradictory, high-stakes information in a state of primal panic, it desperately seeks resolution. It seeks an end to the agonizing ambiguity.
It just wants an answer. Any answer.
And the entity has engineered this situation perfectly so that the only way to resolve the ambiguity, the only way to know for sure which text is lying and which is telling the truth, is to look, to see the truth with their own physical eyes.
So they have to look. They're compelled.
We realize now that the entity didn't just predict the future, it was scripting it. The entire text thread, from the very first notification at 2:1 a.m., was a meticulously designed, perfectly executed psychological funnel engineered with one singular goal.
To get the narrator to physically lean over the edge of the mattress.
Exactly. It wasn't clairvoyance. It was a blueprint.
It was a hunting strategy.
Yes.
And it worked perfectly.
Yeah.
The whisper below the bed turns into a soft, wet, excited laugh.
Ugh, horrifying.
The warning text messages abruptly stop. The phone screen goes dark. The narrator, driven entirely by the absolute need to end the terrifying ambiguity, slowly slides off the center of the bed.
They're giving in.
They keep their feet resting on the metal frame, still trying to follow the obsolete, fake rules the entity set earlier, and they slowly, very slowly, lean over the edge of the bed and look down into the darkness.
And this brings us to the endless cycle of identity theft.
Yeah.
The climax and the true horror of the narrative.
So the narrator looks down over the edge. The phone light on the floor is illuminating the space beneath the mattress. And what do they see?
Nothing.
The space under the bed is completely, utterly empty. There is no face, there are no pale hands, there is just the cold, bare wooden floor.
The cruelty of that empty space is staggering.
It really is. For one split second, the source says the narrator feels a massive wave of relief wash over them.
Of course they do.
Their brain tries one last time to normalize the situation. They think, it's over. It was a hallucination. It was a waking nightmare. It's gone.
The danger has passed.
But the empty space under the bed wasn't a reprieve. It wasn't the monster retreating. It was a vacancy. A vacancy waited to be filled, because the very moment they realize the space beneath them is empty, they hear a quiet sound behind them.
A slow, deliberate movement.
Yes.
The sound of weight shifting, like someone or something climbing onto the bed right behind their back.
The spatial geography of the terror has instantly and completely inverted.
The threat is no longer below in the dark. It has taken the high ground. It has taken the sanctuary of the mattress.
And the whisper returns, But it's not coming from the floorboards anymore. It comes from right behind the narrator's ear.
Oh, that is the worst detail.
In a voice that sounds exactly flawlessly like theirs, it whispers just 4 words. Now check your phone.
The traps snaps shut.
The narrator, trembling, paralyzed, reaches out and picks up the device from the floor. The screen lights up. There is one final message in the thread. The timestamp on the message is 2:41 a.m., exactly 20 minutes in the future from the start of the entire ordeal. The message simply says, "Thank you."
The chilling, mocking politeness of that thank you.
It's so smug.
It signals the absolute completion of a transaction the narrator didn't even know they were participating in until it was far too late. Let's analyze the deeply cyclical nature of this horror.
Let's do it.
When the narrator checks their phone one last time, they see that the contact name for their own number has changed. It no longer shows their name or their picture. It now simply reads, "Under your bed."
Because that's where they belong now.
And the final text from the entity dictates their bleak new reality. Your turn to text the next.
So what does this all mean? The entity has successfully swapped places. The perspective of the entire story has entirely flipped. The narrator has now physically become the very entity they spent the last 20 minutes utterly terrified of.
The irony is deeply, profoundly cruel. The victim is now the monster. They are now physically trapped in the dark, suffocating space beneath the bed, stripped of their life, their identity, and their freedom.
They lost everything.
And their only directive, their only existence moving forward, is to initiate the exact same haunting on whoever occupies the bed above them.
They have to do to someone else what was just done to them.
Yes, they must send the cryptic warnings. They must mimic the voices of the innocent. They must orchestrate the impossible timeline. And they must wait in the dark, patiently, for the next victim's human curiosity to inevitably win.
It is a perfect self-sustaining loop of supernatural identity theft.
It is an inescapable cycle, and it leaves you breathless because of how methodically, how patiently it was executed. It wasn't brute force, it was a hack of the human mind.
It really was. So let's synthesize what we've uncovered in this deep dive. The Midnight Curator didn't just give us a simple ghost story or a jump scare.
Far from it.
We explored a narrative that brilliantly wove together the deep, unquestioned intimacy of a late-night text message, the psychological paralysis of a manipulated timeline, and the fatal, irresistible flaw of human curiosity.
It used our own nature against us.
It took a primal childhood fear the thing under the bed and updated the operating system, creating a perfect psychological trap that uses your own identity and your own need for answers as the bait.
It deeply forces us to examine our relationship with our own devices.
Oh, absolutely.
We trust our phones implicitly. We trust the numbers on the caller ID. We trust the timestamps on our messages. We trust the notifications that pop up on our lock screens.
We don't even question them.
We use these devices to ground us in reality. This story brilliantly weaponizes that exact trust. It shows us how fragile our sense of reality truly is when the digital tools we rely on are turned against us. Thank you for joining us as we explored this dark archive.
Yeah, it's stories like this that force us to look critically at our own instincts, our evolutionary fears, and honestly, the glowing rectangles we sleep next to every single night.
I know, I'm looking at my phone differently now.
Me too. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought.
Okay.
Think about the massive, incredibly detailed digital footprint you leave behind every single day.
It's huge.
The thousands of text messages you send, establishing your specific vocabulary, your humor, your tone, the exact cadence and pitch of your voice, recorded and stored in countless voice notes, voicemails, and social media videos.
So much data.
The high-definition photos of your face, mapped from every angle and stored in the cloud. If something out there, something lurking in the dark, wanted to learn exactly how to be you, how much of your identity is already sitting there, perfectly cataloged in the soft blue glow of your phone screen, just waiting to be copied, right before you check under the bed?
Well, that's going to keep me up tonight.
Keep learning, stay curious, and maybe leave the flashlight off tonight.